haven't read every line of this bill, but I didn't see anything in the bill itself that strips funding if they like continually breach this policy. But yes, like there could be future laws passed to that effect.
It does seem like the funding issue is what has got, President Trump to win at least some ostensible battles against universities. Is to say, the money pipeline's being shut off. Maybe our legislature will have the foresight to follow this up with something decent to add teeth at the financial level.
You're listening to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Sean Grant.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we are thankful you're listening to the show. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee, and all from a conservative Christian worldview. We want to glorify God by helping you to glorify God, so please don't hesitate to send us any questions or comments via email. You can reach me directly by emailing matthew@tnchristian.com.
Or Sean, SHAWN, @tnchristian.com.
Today's show is sponsored in the West Tennessee area by the #1 lawn care company in the Mid-South, Herbie Systems. Summer is here, and Mid-South lawns need the expert treatment you can only get from Memphis's local lawn care company since 1984. If you want to keep your grass healthy and beautiful year-round, the team at Herbie Systems can help. They offer lawn care services to residential and commercial properties in the Mid-South. Their services include fertilization, weed control, lime treatments, aeration, overseeding, grub control, lawn disease control, and more.
Matthew, it's a pleasure to have great sponsors on this show, and we love having Herbie Systems and the quality lawn care company that they've become in the Mid-South. So with summer being here, it's just very clear who's got the best yard service, and that works well with commercial too. It shows when you're using the best. Kenny and his team at Herbie Systems does a fantastic job. They're proven experts in this field. They're professional in every way, and we highly recommend them. So trust the work to the experts at Herbie Systems. Call 901-451-8214 today and let them kill your weeds.
Today's scripture is Galatians, the first chapter, verses 9 through 10. As we said before, so say I now again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you than that ye have received, let him be accursed. For do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ. Tennessee is a great place to live. It's a fantastic place to work, and it's a great place for Christians to gather as churches and worship God. So very often on the show, you hear us bring in great guests from churches and from the political sphere to share what's going on right here in our backyards. And today is another one of those conversations. And we're excited to have longtime friend of the show, Tennessean Josh Abbotoy, and Tennessean and Southern Baptist pastor Jeff Wright. Josh is an attorney. He is a real estate developer. He's the executive director and co-founder of American Reformer. He's also a managing director at New Founding. A seasoned private equity lawyer by background, Josh is a Christian-educated and even homeschooled success story. He earned his BA in history from Union University right here in Tennessee and his Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School. His writing has appeared in American Reformer, The Federalist, and many other places. Josh lives with his wife and 4 children in the Middle Tennessee area. Josh Abbotoy, welcome to Faith in Action. What are you up to right now besides everything? Is there anything going on since last time you came on the show?
Yeah, lots going on. I'm now live in Tennessee. I think maybe I mentioned that last time, but it's good to be home. I grew up in Hartsville, Tennessee, living about an hour from there out in the hills in Jackson County. Wonderful, rural, charming part of the state, and it's great to be back. Mainly fingers in a lot of pies, but running Ridge Runner. So we're doing real estate deals up here, and then the executive director of American Reformer as well.
I appreciate the work that you guys have done both at the PCA General Assembly and at the Southern Baptist Annual Convention. So I'm glad to see that you guys are involved with the more conservative American denominations. Thanks for doing that work. And guys, we're going to get back to that conversation. But first, Sean, what have you got for us today?
Listeners, we've got our friend back here, Jeff Wright. Jeff's a husband, father, pastor, teacher from a small town in Middle Tennessee. He's a fan of C.S. Lewis, local pizza, and Appalachia. He's my kind of guy. Jeff served as the pastor at Midway Baptist Church in Cookeville since 2011. He holds an MAR from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary. His vocational ministry is aimed at maturing Christians in healthy churches, making disciples for the good of their neighbors and the glory of Christ. Jeff's married to Christy, and they have 4 great kids. Jeff, it was great to see you down in Dallas at the SBC annual event, and it's always good to have you here sharing your wisdom with our listeners. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Josh, we had some new laws that have gone into effect, and you are an attorney, and I know you're licensed in Texas. What states do you practice law in?
Only Texas was I licensed in, so but I'm not really a practicing attorney anymore.
But you have some experience. You worked with the Obama administration, surprisingly, on public utilities. We talked about that on an earlier episode. So you have a legal mind, you have legal experience, and you're a good old Tennessee boy. That's a good a good combination. Majority Leader Lambert, who is the majority leader of the Republican Party in the Tennessee General Assembly, recently came out with his annual list of new laws that go into effect. A lot of laws in Tennessee, just for our listeners, start being effective on July 1st of every year. The public safety demanding it is the phrase in the laws that they pass, then points to this day. They can start them anytime they want, but very frequently they start them on July 1st. Can you read that for us, Josh?
Yeah, so this is his most recent one. It was at 5:43 a.m. on July 1st, in which he said, "A state of emergency should always be short in duration by definition. Starting today, any future Tennessee governor will be limited to a duration of 30 days for a declared state of emergency, and the General Assembly can terminate, renew, or extend that declaration. Checks and balances are always a good thing." And then he provides a link to this bill that just passed, which is, if I recall correctly, it's HB 132, Senate Bill 396.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say, Josh, I appreciate Leader Lambert doing this. It's a service that I don't know if somebody in his office does this or if he does it himself. But the starting today thing, it is, honestly, it's better than anything I ever see coming out of any of the Capitol reporting news agencies or anything coming out of the Tennessee. And this is a good little just hashtag to follow that he does. So I appreciate it. But this is a bill that really harkens back to COVID, the state of emergency that Governor Bill Lee kept going on for a long, long time. Governor Lee kept renewing the COVID state of emergency. He kept doing things that a lot of us did not like. What is Lambert actually saying this bill does? Does this address a need that you see?
The bill's interesting. I mean, it under existing law in Tennessee, the legislature can, impeach. I mean, the law says the governor shall not take certain executive action, issue executive orders that would impair the rights of citizens of Tennessee under the Constitution. So we have existing law that says the governor cannot do that. Really, the one enforcement mechanism that the legislature would have for existing law is to impeach the governor. I'm not aware of any other enforcement mechanism that they would have in that circumstance. And that's kind of, arguably, that's going from 0 to 60, right? So I can kind of see in some sense, a case that it's good to give the legislature some lesser options where they can indicate to a governor who's thinking about executive action or maybe taking it, hey, we don't want you doing that, but it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. So I think that's what they're trying to accomplish here, is to basically create a couple more tools where they can oppose a bad execution without going fully nuke impeachment option.
No, they're always had as an option to call an emergency session of the General Assembly. And I think that that's what the framers of the Tennessee State Constitution would have had in mind. Because of our worry, I think, over just spot on, just pop up out of nowhere emergencies, we've given the governor this authority to take emergency action. But isn't it basically nuclear war that we're probably dealing with? That would be just about the only thing that you can't bring the General Assembly into session for?
Sure. I mean, maybe, rapid response to catastrophic flooding, right? So, if he had to, make a call and send disaster relief out to Eastern Tennessee, this past fall, that's probably a use where everybody says, okay, that's a call he should be able to make. It's a live situation. He's got to get helicopters out there to save people. Common sense would say we want the governor to be able to make that call. But shoot, we were able to get Congress together for COVID, like we were able to call Congress and pass a slate of new legislation and spending, got Democrats and Republicans to agree on it. Something that's long burning, like the COVID pandemic, certainly sort of feels like the sort of thing that easily should have called the legislature for that.
Yeah. Is this an attempt to go back in hindsight and say, we should have reined the governor in? We're not going to admit that verbatim, but we are going to pass this law that deals with the last emergency that we really had.
You follow the politics more closely than I do, so I don't want to be too definitive here. It could be a mix of things, right? I mean, maybe they are saying like, shoot, we wish we had that tool in our tool belt, at the time. I wouldn't want to form a strong conclusion on that. But I suspect the reality of the political situation was that there were a lot of representatives who didn't like the COVID executive orders, but they didn't want to go immediately to like an impeachment step as the next remedy.
Right.
And so if there had been something a little bit less severe available, they might very well have sprung for that at the time.
Sure. Folks, so now we've talked a little bit about this bill that passed that restricts the power of the governor, but we want to look at some of these other starting today issues. And I really appreciate, again, like I said, Leader Lamberth doing this. It's an interesting service that he provides on X, little hashtag where he goes through and he says, here are some new laws. So Josh, starting today, Tennessee does not issue licenses to illegal immigrants, but other states do. So starting today, it's illegal to operate a vehicle in the state of Tennessee with an invalid license. In other words, Tennessee is considering licenses issued to illegals to be invalid. And then he says illegal immigrants are simply not welcome in Tennessee. I think that's a win. I think that's great. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I think this is the example of the kind of law that we need to see a lot more of, which is just states getting creative and sitting around, trying to figure out like, what are all the ways that illegal immigrants are interacting with our judicial system and frankly, often causing overload in terms of like the prison system and all these other things. I mean, we've got a strong state interest, public interest, in cracking down on illegal immigration. I think states need to be much more aggressive about asserting their rights as states to keep their citizens safe. So this is a small little thing, but I think it's wonderful. I think we should see like 50 times more laws like this. There could be 50 times more laws like this. It pains me to say, but this one's going to get scrutinized by lawyers, probably going to go to a court case. It's a little bit of an interesting question. There's some bad federal law out there that kind of, using the 14th Amendment may say that like if another state is offering a person this right, then the state of Tennessee has to acknowledge that right. And the laws around what do you do when you've got two different states with different legal systems that conflict get kind of complicated. And frankly, complicated partly just oftentimes because judicial liberals, push certain interpretations that squash state autonomy. So I think it should definitely survive, but will it survive when it gets challenged in court? I think is probably something to watch.
So I'm a Christian who thinks that Christians should carry firearms so that they can protect the lives of innocent people around them as well as themselves. Will this getting dragged into court and being a multi-state issue with this licenses, what will the effect of that be on folks with handgun carry permits? Because when I first started having a Tennessee handgun carry permit a number of years ago, it was valid in a state that I used to travel to a lot, Minnesota. Last I checked, it's no longer valid, my handgun carry permit in Minnesota. They don't recognize that reciprocity. So if this driver's license statute is challenged and the courts say, hey, you have to recognize the right of illegals to drive in your state, it would seem to me that would relate to other types of permits issued between states, wouldn't it?
It should. That's the kind of thing that's going to get debated. You're exactly right. Like the fact that carry permits are not treated reciprocally between all of the states is like kind of almost a direct analog to this. The liberals would argue, well, somebody who's present in the United States, whether legally or not, needs to drive, and that's basically a fundamental human right. And if some states are recognizing it, others need to as well. So, again, I don't think these are great arguments, but I'm just articulating what they will argue.
Yeah.
I mean, in some sense, they'll probably end up arguing that driving is a more fundamental right than owning a gun, and try to use that to strike down the Tennessee law.
Yeah, it's another issue, and this is administrative law. The term fax and facsimile transmission starting today have been replaced throughout the code with electronic transmission. 1985 called, and they want their technology back. When communicating with your state government, you should have modern options. Now you do. It's interesting that that's going to be legally binding. I just recently had to fill a form out with a major multinational corporation, and they did not accept an electronic transmission. They used to, but now they've gone back to only accepting faxes. Another interesting thing for us on Faith in Action, because we've been talking about this since 2019. We were the first radio show that I'm aware of in Tennessee to speak out against wokeness. Again, from leader William Lambert's X account. Colleges and universities in Tennessee, starting today, may not discriminate against an applicant for admission, scholarships, or financial aid based on race, color, ethnicity, or national origin. Students should be admitted based on their merit, not immutable characteristics they can't change and shouldn't have to worry about. Racism anywhere is an attack on us all. Another good bill by Jason Zachary, TN. What do you think about that, Josh?
I think it's wonderful. And they did it not only for admission to colleges, they also did it for appointment to boards as well, in a sort of a sister bill. So they're trying to hit at the root of DEI in both higher ed and then also in board appointments, for state governmental boards. So I think it's all very wonderful. I'd say this. I think all of the red states that have tried to roll back DEI have found that, personnel is policy. And so, you can pass a great sounding law, but if you're not getting rock-ribbed conservatives on the boards and in the administration of your red state universities, it's going to be like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole to some extent. They're going to find new ways to get to the same result. They're going to be very good at navigating these laws. They've seen a bit of this in Florida as well as Texas. Texas banned DEI, I think 2 years ago now, and it's been sort of a nonstop trench fighting with a number of schools down there just to ensure compliance with the laws. And so This is good. I think it's very salutary to have passed it, but how much it's going to change or affect policy at red state universities, or at Tennessee's public universities, I think that all has to do with how aggressively it's enforced and really getting the right personnel in place at the top at these institutions.
Yeah, if they're only relying on old people timing out, the DEI, can they go in and fire people who violate these policies and then use these to replace, or do we just have to wait? Is this a time game?
I don't know all the appointment mechanisms at all of these universities, but I think that certainly in Texas they've tried to do this. In an ideal world, you would have an aggressive administration that's actually pursuing and trying to enforce this against existing administration. I do think it's probably pretty certain that they will do what they can to deaden the effect of this law. And so, I think ideally you've got a governor and an attorney general who are very zealously prosecuting and investigating to make sure that there's compliance. And that could result in acceleration of personnel change.
Josh, could I jump in with a follow-up question there?
Please do.
Is there any chance that this is a step one approach, setting up step two? So you have this on the books. You see the school, let's use state school, playing funny with the compliance. Is that step two to then say, well, now your funding is jeopardized?
Yeah, I think they'd have to pass further laws on this, yes. But it's basically civil remedies. Like you'd take these universities to court, basically, if they're not complying, and you'd ask a judge to force them to comply. And, presumably they'd have to pay your attorney's fees to do it. But that's sort of the remedy right now. It really requires the attorney general to enforce it as it's set up right now. Or an individual could sue them if they thought they'd been discriminated against in application. I haven't read every line of this bill, but I didn't see anything in the bill itself that strips funding if they continually breach this policy. But yes, there could be future laws passed to that effect.
It does seem like the funding issue is what has got, President Trump to win at least some ostensible battles against universities. Is to say, the money pipeline's getting shut off. Maybe our legislature will have the foresight to follow this up with something decent to add teeth at the financial level.
Yeah, that would be wonderful if they did that. I guess I'll note one other thing, and this actually harkens back to our discussion earlier about the bill that purportedly sort of limits the governor's emergency powers. So this one, it's basically saying what the federal law already is. So because of recent Supreme Court decisions banning affirmative action, to be clear, before this law was passed, it was already illegal to exclude a person from benefits, activities, employment, making decisions based on a person's race, color, ethnicity, or natural origin. in college applications. So, y'all probably or maybe followed somewhat like the Harvard affirmative action lawsuits that went up to the Supreme Court, but those did establish pretty clearly that even if it's discrimination that harms a group that's not historically disadvantaged, you can't be discriminating on the basis of any race. And so basically, what they call reverse discrimination, right? But discrimination against, whites or Asians or, these other groups, that it's also illegal to discriminate against them in your application process. That's already federal law. And so it's not really doing a lot past what already exists under existing law. And so this is where, you'd love to see some more, to some of Jeff's questions, some more creativity on the remedies that can be used to enforce it.
I want to make a really big leap. This is a complete change of scope, and I hope I'm able to bring everyone along here. So the Supreme Court made these rulings about discrimination in education. And then the state of Tennessee came back and they passed these laws essentially in response to that. That's a recognition that the courts don't really make law. They make rulings, and then the state has to come back and they have to make law. And I'm going back to many of our episodes with Senator David Fowler, formerly with the Family Action Council of Tennessee, because, Josh, there has been an effort. There have been people lately saying we need to see Obergefell get turned over. All right, so here's the first step on this bridge of this big leap. When the Supreme Court made the Obergefell decision, Tennessee didn't pass a lot of laws related to that. They didn't pass really any laws related to that. They just started issuing marriage certificates. I don't even want to call them couples, to same-sex couplings. But the law never changed. As far as I know, Tennessee law, even though the marriage certificates will be issued to men marrying men and women marrying women in Tennessee, our law never changed. Josh, does the state legislature's response to this issue clearly indicate that they understand they need to respond to Supreme Court rulings? And do we need a response to the marriage ruling in Tennessee likewise now? Is this 10 years later, is it time to start fighting same-sex marriage in Tennessee again along the same lines?
So what they did here with college DEI, let's just be clear, it's actually after the Supreme Court, and it's basically just repeating what the Supreme Court has already said. So it's not really changing the status quo all that much.
Mm-hmm. It's codifying it.
Yes, it is.
The Supreme Court ruling, yes.
So in the case of Obergefell and what can be done there, I have some broad familiarity with some of David Fowler's theories on what could be done to start chipping away at Obergefell at the state level. I think some of that's very interesting. I think the fact that Tennessee did not codify same-sex marriage after Obergefell is a win. I think it's a win that our laws still say marriage is between a man and a woman. And then something that happened last year, which is small, but I think actually a pretty nice move, is we did enact a law last year that was signed by Governor Lee that will allow officials to opt out from performing a same-sex marriage or issuing a certificate. A small thing, but as you know, in a lot of counties, there's going to be people availing themselves of that law. Now, the person seeking a marriage license, there's still going to be places they can go. It certainly doesn't chip away at that broadly in the state, but it does give space in the law for Christians to be in government without violating their conscience by issuing certificates for marriages that they don't believe are valid.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm sure as a pastor, you have something to add to this.
Yeah, as a pastor, it informs kind of my perspective. But here again, it's late in the game, right? So we've spent a considerable amount of time catechizing our culture that same-sex unions are just as normal as heterosexual unions. And now you're depending upon a private individual in a public office for election to show bravery. I wish, to something Josh said earlier, I'm still waiting for the legislature to get out aggressively and lead on this and give the kind of people who have had to spend, since Obergefell, violating their conscience, give them something more substantial to work with. And we're not going to do this except for a particular petition or something along those lines. I realize that's a pipe dream, but at this point, Tennessee's had, I think, a supermajority GOP in their legislature for a long time. How about we start getting aggressive? Josh was talking about noodling on how to make illegal immigration an issue in Tennessee. The people who are flocking to this state are looking for leadership. They're looking for bold action. If we're going to love our neighbors who are coming here, looking for a place of refuge. We actually want to make Tennessee the state they think they're coming to. And I'd like to see our legislature do something more than just trail along later on and say, okay, it's been decade plus. Now you can do something if you want to risk your elected position. Yeah. How about give them something more substantial to work under?
Yeah. Well, folks, that's going to do it for another episode of Faith in Action. And listeners, we are glad you tune in each week in Nashville, Memphis, and all over the other areas in Tennessee that our show reaches as we talk about more ways to put your faith into action. If you want to hear more on this or other topics from a Christian worldview, head on over to botradionetwork.com and search for Faith in Action. There we have links to over 5 years of past shows. You can listen to a wide range of guests sharing their wisdom about current events that affect Tennessee and all of the Mid-South region. Until next week, remember our favorite promise from the book of Exodus: the Lord shall reign forever and ever.